I think the weakest link is probably Sean right now. He's our weakest link because he brings everybody down. You know, I think we're keeping him here for the next two immunities. I mean, Rupert wanted Sean off before Michelle. I had to talk Rupert out of that. I mean, literally, Rupert was like, you have got to give me a hug and just hold me because Sean is upsetting me so much. And so, yeah, I think Sean is just really the weakest link at this point. I think that the biggest weakness that he has is that he constantly focuses on the negative. He focuses on what we don't have versus what we should have. Focuses on, you know, the rain instead of getting comfortable. He focuses on all of his fights. It's all about him. Everything is about him. And yet, there are parts to his personality that I really like. You know, and I think he's extremely funny. He brings a lot of humor to the game, a lot of personality to the game. But at this stage of the play, when we're all feeling vulnerable, we cannot have somebody constantly focusing on what we did wrong and whose fault it was. And he tends to do that. Sandra, I think, is going to do anything she can do to make sure that her name isn't on that paper. And that's the bottom line. She's a little bit of a worry to me because if for some reason the Morgans pick up on that part of her personality and they're very, very strong five, and they say to her, hey, you're going to be number two, we know you're going to be number two, or you're going to be the first one voted off of the Drakes, I wouldn't be surprised if she went over to them. And I mean, it's just suicide because all you're doing is keeping yourself here a few more days, one more tribal council. But she will do whatever it takes and align herself with whatever it takes to have her name out on that thing. I'm not quite sure how loyal she really is. I wouldn't take any Drake out before Morgan. I wouldn't take any Drake out before Morgan, but if it got down to just the Drakes, she would be the first one I would take. You know, I think at this stage, everybody is pretty much pulling their weight. I mean, there are times like in the mornings, John sits around a lot, you know, and the mornings just happens to be where I have a lot of energy in the mornings. And so I get a lot done. But I like to lay down a little bit more toward, you know, mid-afternoon because I start to get tired from not sleeping all night and then really working all morning long. And so John's thing is he usually sits around in the morning, but then if work needs to be done, he's the first one to jump up and do it. So, you know, Krista, I think, spends a lot of time at the sewing machine, a lot of time making little things. But again, if work needs to be done, Krista's the first one to jump up and do it. Recently, Rupert caught a ton of fish, and it was just pouring rain, and it was freezing. And Sandra, Krista, and I had just laid down. It was the middle of the day. And I was praying Rupert wasn't going to come back yet because I knew when he came back with that fish. Anytime Rupert's around, we have to work. And it was pouring and we were warm and we were just sitting there, the three of us talking. And we'd only been there about 10 minutes and he comes back with the fish. And he was like, no, you know, I'll scale him and clean him, you know, no big deal. Because he had already been wet. And then Sandra felt guilty, you know, so she went out and she's like, I better help Rupert. So then I felt bad. So then I went out. Then Krista felt bad. But the three of us were out there in the freezing, pouring rain, scaling and cleaning that fish. And, you know, Sean spends his whole life at the fire, you know, so he's dealing with the fire. John was under the tent, but basically convinced the rain was about to stop any second, and we were stupid for going out there in the rain to do this, which it didn't stop, and we stood out there and scaled the fish. But there isn't really anybody who I look at and I really get irritated that they're not doing anything or they're not pulling the weight. There really isn't anybody, I don't think, at this